Gwen was fighting with some idiot in a mask while she was in her Lucky Girl outfit and fought them off, with a crowd cheering for her as they'd run over trying to swarm her with questions and get pictures with her and autographs, that sort of stuff. The guy she'd been fighting tried to get away and ran smack into Rook's proto truck in the process. Gwen asked them what exactly they were doing there, and Ben says that her school was having an open house apparently, and he figured any excuse to come see her is a good excuse. He left Max and Albedo in charge of the city while visiting her, though Ship was also supposed to help keep an eye on things, just in case. They headed off together to this food truck that had special sandwiches that were good, by human standards at least, but Ben wasn't used to human standards. They hear some jocks using their role as MVP from the previous game to cut in line in front of someone that had said that they were ahead of them, and Ben walked over tapping the jock on the shoulder. Ben tells the jock that he has a counter argument. As not everyone cares about sports, that should not factor in whether or not he is allowed to cut in line, and thus his MVP status is rendered moot. Then told the jock to get to the back of the line, as he'd given them a look that scared them, and made them not only back off the poor kid, but decided that they were gonna go eat somewhere else. The crowd started to recognize Ben and tried the same thing that they had done with Lucky Girl earlier, but he wasn't having it as he told them to back off him. He was just here to visit his fiancée for a while and get a break from hero work. They backed off Ben. However, the girls were having a field day with Rook, rubbing his fur and pulling on his face and ears. A stone creature attacked them, smashing the food truck. Rook used his proto tool to start fighting them off, with Ben hitting the Omnitrix, changing into jury rig and looking around. He then runs off towards the smashed truck, telling Rook to cover them as Gwen had snuck off and changed into her Lucky Girl outfit before coming back to help. Rook tells them that it seems to be one of Charmcaster's rock creatures, but Gwen tells them that she doesn't sense her magic in it. The creature was being controlled by someone else. They fight it with Ben blasting it, having turned the food truck into a makeshift cannon-like weapon that made the spicy sauce into balls of fire. The creature attacked the truck with Ben pulling the lever on the seat, leaning it back as it tried to chomp down on him, accidentally biting on the Omnitrix dial on his belt, instead causing a large blast of energy to be radiated from it, and knocking the creature back as it ran off back to wherever it had come from, to get away from Ben. Gwen asked Ben if he is alright, and he tells them that he is, while checking the Omnitrix, and he sees that it only had Ghost Freak dialed in, and looked worried but decided to try to figure that out later. They chased after the stone creature and find that it had vanished in Zagliv's class, and after finding that it had gone, went to take seats as our Ben could actually pay attention in her class, unlike Ben Prime. Unlike in the show, they do not get Gwen kicked out of class, meaning they were able to see what was happening, and Zagliv showed them something they had procured on loan from a private donor that had appeared to be a charm of Bezel. Ben asked if they could get a closer look at it, as they'd seen something like that during their early days, and Zagliv says that it's on loan and not to break it, asking if she could read it. Gwen tells Ben that it looks like the closest translation she could think of was something akin to telekinesis. This impresses Zagliv, as Ben tells her Gwen is the more magical-centered of the two of them, and that he is more technology-inclined. Though Gwen says that maybe Hex could give them a better translation, they would have to ask him to check it out later. On their way to ask Hex to check out the charm, they were then attacked by a bunch of black-hooded people on rock monsters, and Ben checks the Omnitrix, seeing it working, and hits the dial, changing into Eye Guy and blasting the rock creatures. Rook says this one is new, and Ben tells him that he's been fiddling with the Omnitrix like he used to do as a kid, and unlocked a few new guys since then. They continued to blast the rock creatures, smashing them to bits, with Gwen changing into Lucky Girl quickly behind a statue, and then joining in the fight, using her magic to create a barrier as they were about to smash her, then called out a wind spell, making the people on the stone creatures be lifted up off of them and dropped onto the ground. They then started to retreat immediately after that. They decided that it's better to take the charm from Zagliv now, just to be on the safe side, with all those people attacking, and head back to her office, as there was another student there talking with her about something. It was the guy Ben helped out earlier with the jocks. They tell Zagliv that it's best they take the charm with them because of the attacks. She says no, but Ben tells her that this has become official plumber business, and he, as acting magister, is hereby ordering the immediately confiscation of the charm. This confused her as she hadn't dealt with the plumbers before, with Rook explaining that they are a global and galactic police force. And while they were explaining, the guy had taken the charm as they weren't paying attention. The student, called Dante, was told by Zaglib that he was expelled as he blasted them with strange energy that was black in color. Gwen tried to blast them with her magic, but they'd absorbed her attacks and called her lovely Gwen, telling her that her magic was too sweet, as he began trying to drain her. But Ben had gone into action immediately, dashing forward and used the plasma blade, slicing off his hand that he was focusing his draining powers through, lopping it off at the wrist. That caught everyone off guard as Ben had a seriously dangerous look in his eyes, as they tried to get away, with Rook making sure Gwen was alright and Ben chasing after Darkstar, calling out that he was going to kill them for trying that again. They tried using the charm of telekinesis to stop Ben from going after them, and he'd hit the Omnitrix, changing into Eye Guy, and began blasting at him from a distance, showing that he could still attack even from there. They continued running, having had enough of being target practice, with Gwen now going with Rook since she was okay. Just a little drained, but otherwise okay. She'd said that Ben was serious about killing him, as she'd seen him kill before, and they needed to go after them before something happened, and Rook helped her to get to them. Darkstar had sealed the door behind him as Ben was chasing after, having timed out and changed back to human, and he'd slammed his fists against the door as Michael's followers asked if he was alright. He'd asked if he looked alright, gesturing to his severed hand, as they continued to hear beating on the door behind them. Ben tells the Omnitrix to give him whatever could get through the door, saying that it was showing all Ghost Freak again, and at this point he didn't care, changing into them and phasing through the door as Michael told the followers, but was cut off with Ben possessing him and ordering them all to back off and to leave if they valued their lives, making them all run. Rook blasted the door with a small missile, blowing it to bits, as Gwen called out to Ben, telling him not to kill him. He's not worth it. Ben turns to look at Gwen, having the plasma blade at Michael's throat, saying that he's absolutely worth it. Any Ubros Beaton that tried to feed on her deserves it, but she tells him he's not worth it. It's best to just let the Inkarsicon sort him out, and he sighs, knowing that she's right, letting Michael drop. Ben apologizes to Gwen for all that, but when they were, and she wrapped her arms around him, telling him that it's over now and that's what matters.